Hello viewers, welcome back to our series of lectures on the topic absorption spectra. Today we will talk about UV visible spectroscopy. In this part 1 of our lectures on UV visible spectroscopy, I will focus attention on to the origin and characteristics of the UV spectrum. The session is planned as follows, that is, to begin with I will just try to recall what we did in the previous session, and then thereafter we will try to define what is UV spectroscopy, and then thereafter we will talk about the significance of UV visible spectroscopy. Having done that, we will move on to what do we understand by UV visible spectrum, how does it look like, and what are its characteristics. And in this context, we will briefly touch upon the meaning of position of the signals, the intensity and the width of it. And then towards the end, we will try to sum up what we do in today's session. So, with this kind of an outline, let us make a beginning by recalling what we did in the previous session. In the previous session, we started by defining what is spectroscopy, and thereafter we described the nature of EM radiation and molecules, because we defined spectroscopy to be the interaction of radiation and matter. So, thereby we were kind of to understand that we talked about EM radiation and the molecules. Thereafter, we discussed different modes of interaction between the EM radiation and matter, and then thereafter we talked about the meaning of the spectrum and also outline the characteristics of the spectrum. We will try to build on that today, that is the characteristics part we will try to work further on. Okay. Now, let us see what is UV visible spectroscopy. UV visible spectroscopy basically, if you really ask me, is one of the earliest spectroscopic methods which is known to us, because spectroscopy is in use for very long. UV visible spectroscopy happens to be one of the first few to start with. This basically is based on the interaction of the molecules with EM radiation in the UV visible region of the spectrum. And we talked about EM spectrum in the previous session, and in that the UV visible region is the one which is of interest to us from UV visible spectroscopy point of view. And just to see that, what basically does is these radiation which fall in the region of UV visible, they have such energies that they kind of introduce the transition amongst the electronic energy levels of the molecule. That is why this is also called as electronic spectroscopy. Typically, the physical chemists talk to it about in terms of electronic spectroscopy. But basically, what we try to refer to is the interaction of radiation in the UV visible region with the molecules, and the consequence of that basically is of our interest. Okay. Now, let us see briefly what exactly we mean by the UV visible range. This is an expanded portion of our electromagnetic spectrum there. So, I will just try to highlight the region of interest to us. So, we will be focusing attention on to this region from about 200 to 400 nanometer is my near UV region, that is what is the main stake here. And then of course, we have got the visible region which extends from about 400 nanometers to around 760, 770 nanometers or so. And then region beyond that is actually near IR, and the region prior to this about 200 nanometers below that is your vacuum UV. So, that is the kind of range we are going to address ourselves to. So, primarily from 200 nanometers to roughly about 800 nanometers is the region of UV visible radiation. And if we look at it here, the energies, the energy of UV radiation about 200 nanometers is about 600 kilojoules per mole, and that of 400 is that is a limit here, from 300 kilojoules to 600 kilojoules is the energy of UV radiation, whereas the visible range has got energy from about minus about 160 kilojoules to 300 kilojoules. So, and that energy is sufficient enough to cause transition amongst the electronic energy levels there. Okay. Now, with having talked about this range, let us see that we did have a whole range here, but what happens is, practically speaking, the absorption of wavelengths less than 200 nanometers, which is the far UV region, they basically cannot be detected ordinarily, because to look into that region, we have to do some kind of a you have to use specialized instruments over there. The reason for that is that actually below 200 nanometers, what happens is the oxygen which is present in the air, that starts absorbing. Since oxygen is in plenty over there, so a molecule also interacts with the radiation, so does oxygen. But since oxygen concentration is more, so the signal comes more of oxygen than of the molecule we want to study about there. So, basically the oxygen obscures our absorptions over there. So we have to use specialized instruments there. What we basically have to do is we have to use what is called as vacuum UV, that the chamber where the sample is kept, they have to be evacuated so that all oxygen can be taken off. And then thereafter probably we have to use some kind of other requirements like purging with nitrogen, that means you pass nitrogen gas through that so that all oxygen is taken care of, and then we can make a meaningful spectrum over there. Normally this is not used unless it is very specifically required. So normally we focus attention from about 200 nanometers to 400 and then thereafter to about 800 nanometers. So that's the region where UV visible spectroscopy focuses attention on to. Now let's see the significance of UV visible spectroscopy. What basically this does is that primarily speaking, the UV visible spectroscopy gives us information about the unsaturation in the molecule, and also if there is some kind of a conjugation of this unsaturation with other kind of double bond over there or even with non-bonding electrons. So primarily this gives us information about the unsaturation in the molecules and of course the conjugation. Second thing is, this actually is used extensively to differentiate between the molecules which are conjugated and the ones which are non-conjugated. So that actually is seen in terms of where is the location of the spectrum. We will talk in detail about all these things as we proceed. Essentially this gives me information about firstly whether the molecule is conjugated or not. If yes, how does it differentiate between suppose there are two molecules which will absorb where, all those things can be really worked out. There is a good correlation between the molecular structure and the spectrum over there. We will talk about this in later episodes. Yet another thing which probably can be made use of is that is, suppose you have got a molecule, we can even predict, because there is so much of data available to us, that we can even make predictions about the lambda max values for a given molecule there if it is unsaturated. Okay, so there are three broad areas where UV visible spectroscopy helps us out. In the current context, in the present context, what has happened is the other methods have come up like IR spectroscopy, which we will be talking about at a later stage, and NMR spectroscopies, which will be taking up in yet another course over there. So in the light of these two spectroscopies provide us much more information, especially that NMR spectroscopy gives us extensive amount of information about the molecule. So this UV visible actually is losing importance as regards the structural elucidation. Suppose I want to work out the structure of a molecule, UV visible is not the technique of choice. However, if I want to talk about a quantification as regards a quantitative determination or the interaction studies, that is how do the two molecules interact with each other, probably UV visible is the best bet with us. So it has got some positive points, some kind of a negative points over there. It is not a negative point, but not so very important aspect of it. Okay. Now let us move further and see how does this UV visible spectrum look like, because you are seeing spectrum for the first time now. Spectrum looks something like this. What basically we have is, we did talk about it in the previous session also, that this basically is a graphical representation of, on one axis we have got the wavelength, some kind of characteristic of our EM radiation, whether it is a wavelength, wave number or frequency, and on y axis we have got some measure of the intensity over there. So this is a graphical representation. This tells us about what are the wavelengths which are absorbed, if they are absorbed, and this tells us about to what extent are they absorbed. So that is how a spectrum looks like. So typically UV visible spectrum consists of absorption bands. This is one of the bands over there, this is another one here, this is a weak band, this is a strong band. So we will talk in detail about the meaning of weak and strong at a later stage, but basically the point I want to bring home is that a spectrum looks like made up of certain absorption bands over there. We will read more about it later on. Okay. Now let us see what are the characteristics of this. This probably will be kind of very asserting over there, that is, we have something called as the position. Position basically refers to at what wavelength are the bands coming, that means the location of the signal. This basically is determined in terms of the energies involved in the transitions over there. Suppose I got different energy levels, so from which level to which level, that delta E of the two levels involved determines the position of the signal. And second characteristic is the intensity. Intensity is a measure of the extent of absorption, that means whether the wavelength is absorbed or not. If yes, to what extent. If it is absorbed more, the signal will be intense. If it is absorbed less, it will be weaker signal over there. So that is how do we talk about intensity. The parameters kind of determining them will be discussed at a later stage. The third parameter is, the third characteristic is the width of spectrum. This basically tells us the spread of it. That means you have a band, is it a sharp band or a broad band kind of a thing. So, is it spread over a wavelength? So, that is the meaning of width of the spectrum here. Okay. Let us understand the first characteristic is very crucial for us. Let us understand how do we determine the position of the band in a given spectrum. The position of spectral band, as we mentioned earlier, are basically determined by the transitions amongst the electronic energy levels. But what are these electronic energy levels? How do we get them from? For a given molecule, how do I know what are the energy levels there? For that, we know that these electronic energy levels can be obtained by using what is called as molecular orbital theory, which you learnt about in your school and later in the college as well. That is, we have to recall our molecular orbital treatment of bonding in the molecules there. Let me just quickly recall it for you. We know that the atomic orbitals of the constituent atoms, they combine together to give you molecular orbitals. So, that is the basic premise of our MO theory. This gives you an example of the bonding in case of hydrogen molecule. 1s orbital of first hydrogen atom, that of second, the two combine together to give us two molecular orbitals there. One is a bonding molecular orbital, one is an anti-bonding molecular orbital. Bonding molecular orbital is because of the constructive overlap between the two orbitals there, and this is by destructive overlapping. So, we get two energy levels. This bonding orbital is of energy lower than that of the starting orbitals there, and this is of higher energy there. So, this stabilizes, this causes bonding. Any occupancy of this will try to destabilize the molecule. So, that is how the bonding and anti-bonding molecular orbitals come into picture. This basically are the sigma molecular orbitals. Sigma molecular orbitals are found when the atoms combine along the internuclear axis over there. Another possibility is that we can have kind of overlapping, a combination of p orbitals like this. That means they are laterally overlapped. Suppose this is my atom 1, atom 2. So, this is one p orbital, another p orbital, they will combine laterally like this. When they combine like this, they give us again two orbitals there. This is a bonding molecular orbital, this is anti-bonding over there. So, this basically is a generation of pi molecular orbitals. So, the first ones are called sigma, these are called as pi molecular orbitals. Now, when we move on to larger molecules, we can make some kind of generalizations there, and we can think of a generalized MO diagram for large organic compounds there, and that looks something like this. What basically we have is, we have got different kinds of molecular orbitals like sigma molecular orbital, pi, non-bonding ones, pi star and sigma star, and this actually gives us some kind of a representation of the order of their energies. That means the sigma orbitals will be of least energy, then will come the pi orbital, then non-bonding one, then pi star and the sigma star. That is generalization kind of a thing we have. Now, the question comes is that how do we talk about the transitions in them? Let us see that. Basically, when we talk about a molecule, typically what happens is that the bonding molecular orbitals and sometimes even the non-bonding molecular orbitals are occupied by the electrons over there. When that happens, that means basically when the molecular orbitals are formed, then all the electrons are put into these molecular orbitals. When we do that, the molecular orbital which has got the highest occupied molecular orbital is called as HOMO, that is called as a homo orbital there, and this lowest unoccupied molecular orbital is called as LUMO, HOMO and LUMO. And typically what happens is, the most of the transitions which we come across in UV visible, they belong to transition from HOMO level to LUMO level. So, this is the most important transition which will be coming across there. So, that is once again a kind of a generalization. Let us take up certain class of molecules and see what kind of transitions take place and what do they mean to us. Let us see. The first possibility could be something like we have got N to pi star transition, or we may have pi to pi star, or we may have N to sigma star, or pi to sigma star, or we may have sigma to pi star, or we can even have sigma to sigma star. So, they are all possibilities, but what happens is, all these transitions we thought of, we are trying to show over here, they are not observed, and we know that basically out of all these transitions possible, there are only certain transitions which are observed, and they are determined by what is called as the selection rule. Selection rules is not in the domain of our session over here. Basically, there are certain rules which tell us whether a given transition will be observed or not observed. So, the ones which are observed, so that means which are permitted, so to say, by the selection rules, they will be observed, and the ones which are not permitted will be called as the forbidden transitions there. So, there are some theoretical rules over there on the basis of which we say whether transition will be observed or not. However, what happens is that sometimes these forbidden transitions are also observed, and these are of very low intensity. One typical example is our N to pi star transition. N to pi star transition is actually not allowed from the selection rules, but because certain other considerations, we find that these transitions are observed, because the rules are not absolute, they are indicative. So, these transitions which are observed are of low intensity, and we got a very weak signal for that. We will talk about it at a later stage as well. Okay. Now, let us take up different kind of molecules and see what are the possible transitions in that, and how do we really visualize them. The simplest one to start with is, say, alkanes. In case of alkanes, primarily since there is no unsaturation in that, so all the orbitals which will be occupied will be the sigma orbitals, nothing else, because there is no pi orbital in that. And in such case, the only transition which is possible is our sigma to sigma star. And in case of alkanes, say, let us take the example of ethane. In case of ethane, this transition will be at about 150 nanometers, which is tremendously high amount of energy. Firstly, we can't observe it because we need special instruments for that, and secondly, this transition is of such a high energy that this molecule actually will break, because if we have a sigma bond, and let us look at this picture here. So, this is my molecular orbitals there, this is my sigma molecular orbital here, wherein the two carbon atoms are joined by sigma bond over there. This sigma molecular orbital is there. That means, this is a bonding molecular orbital where the two electrons are there. And when I make a transition from this level to sigma star, what happens is, we can see it like this, that this is a combination of these two orbitals over here. We find that this is there are two my carbon atoms there, this is my bonding molecular orbital, and these are the two anti-bonding lobes over there. So, when I say I make a transition, essentially electrons go from this bonding level to anti-bonding level. So, since they go away from the internuclear region, that means the charge density in that region decreases, whereby the strength of the bond decreases. Effectively, we can even say that it will lead to cleavage of bond. We can even think of, there is a sigma bond there, an electron goes off from here, transition takes place, this bond can break. So, that can lead to a cleavage of the bond. So, that is one possibility. Let us move further and see if I have got a molecule which is unconjugated. Let me take a simple alkene, say ethene. In case of ethene, we will have sigma orbitals which are occupied, we will also have the pi orbitals which are occupied. In such cases, the possible transitions which will be observed will be sigma to sigma star, again similar to what we just talked about in case of alkanes, and also we will have one more possibility, that is, we have a transition from our pi orbital to pi star molecular orbital. So, and this transitions, that these two, this as before is about 150 nanometers, which is probably not of interest to us, but we find that this transition is getting somewhat meaningful, because it is coming at about 170 to 190 nanometers for alkenes in general, and for ethane particularly it is about 175 nanometers there. So, that is where we observe this. And how do we represent that? So, that is my sigma pi molecular orbital for alkene, this is my pi star. So, this is bonding one, we can see that the internuclear region, there is the electron density is fairly large, whereas in this case this is anti-bonding molecular orbital. When the transition takes place, that is how do we represent that. That means, the electrons go from a bonding region to anti-bonding region, the bond weakens, and then some kind of polarity comes into it, which has a role to play. We will talk about that when we talk about the effect of solvent on the systems. So, that is my pi to pi star transition. Let me take yet another system. This is a similar thing represented differently. This is my pi molecular orbitals in case of ethene and going to pi star, the transition there. Now, let me take another molecule, another kind of class of molecules, that is my ketones, saturated ketones. In case of saturated ketones, what are the possibilities? Our sigma orbitals are filled, so are pi orbitals, and even non-bonding electrons will be there on the oxygen atom there. So, when we have that, the possible transitions will be something like N to pi star, which will be a weak transition. We just mentioned about it, because this is not an allowed transition otherwise. It is a forbidden transition, but it is observed, it is very weak. Then another one is, we have a strong transition coming from N to sigma star. This again is observed, and the third one is from pi to pi star, which is a very, very strong transition which is coming. And effectively speaking, this pi to pi star is the most important transition for us in case of saturated ketones there. And let us see that in terms of molecular orbitals here. So, there are the different molecular orbitals for my ketones there. So, this is my first non-bonding, it is in sp, that is electron non-bonding. on sp orbital on the carbon atom or oxygen atom over here, and these are the different other molecular orbitals here. So, in this case the possible transitions which are observed will be, one will be n to pi star, I mean this n is on py, that means the y orbital on the oxygen atom there. From this to pi star, that is the kind of transition we are going to have, and that is how do we represent that. That means you go from this non-bonding electron is going to an anti-bonding electron. So, this is going to weaken the bonding there. And second possibility is, as before, we have pi to pi star transition, and that is how do we represent that. We are going from a bonding molecular orbital to anti-bonding molecular orbital. So, we see that effectively speaking, when we interact a molecule depending on its nature, whether it is an alkane, alkene or a ketone, we find that all of them lead to some kind of electronic transitions there, and the nature of transitions are going to be different in each of the, and that also will depend on what kind of energy of the radiation is being used over there. Now, well, let us move on to the next part of it. The first thing primarily we discuss is the position part of the spectrum. The second thing which is of interest to us is the intensity of signal. Intensity of signal depends on three things. The first is the transition probability. That means this basically, as the name suggests, transition probability, the probability for a given transition to occur, or we can say it is the allowedness of a given transition. That means to what extent the transition is allowed, and that typically goes from 0 to 1. 1 means allowed, 0 means forbidden. So, we are, and that actually is a quantum mechanical term which we basically use the wave functions for the level from where the transition is beginning and the one where transition is ending. So, all those put together, so this is a parameter which is of interest to us. And what we can understand it in the following way. Now, suppose I have got two transitions, say transition 1 is from some level psi A1 to A2, and the transition 2 is from level B1 to B2. And what I say is that, and what I have taken here is that delta EA and delta EB, that means for this transition and this transition, they happen to be same. And also, if I assume that the concentration also happens to be the same, then if I observe that a given transition, say T, the intensity of transition 1 happens to be more than that of 2, that basically can be interpreted in terms of that the transition probability of this transition is more than this one. That means, this transition is allowed to more extent than this transition. Probably we can even quote here the example we took earlier, that is of ketone, because the concentration is the same molecule I am talking about. The transition from n to pi star is a weak transition, whereas pi to pi star is a strong transition, means that transition probability is more, that is why the signal was intense, and then n to pi star is a weaker signal there. So, that is the meaning, because basically in that case the concentration is not a determinant there, it is a transition probability which matters in that case. Okay. Another factor which comes into determining the intensity is the concentration of absorbing species, which is obvious. More the concentration, there are more molecules which are going to absorb, we are going to have a higher intensity, and this will be taking up in much details at a later stage when we talk about variety of the kind of applications we talk about, how do we use UV visible spectroscopy for quantification and other aspects of the applications part there. The third thing is the target area of the absorbing species. This also basically we can just make a mention here, that is larger the target area, greater is the intensity. That means, suppose radiation is coming and that molecule, if it happens to be larger, that means the chromophore, I do not want to use the term at this stage because I have not introduced that as yet. We will talk something more about it at a later stage. When we talk about the molecule which is going to absorb, the size of that is going to matter in that case. That also is going to be kind of contributing to the intensity of the signal there. Let us move on to the width of spectrum, the next characteristic of our the spectrum here. And now, what basically happens is, typically what do we expect? What do we expect is that if I have a transition from a given level, say level 1 to level 2, I would expect outcome as a single signal, some kind of a single signal over there. But what I showed you earlier was the spectrum happens to be the broad bands are coming over there. Why do we get the bands in this case? First reason for that is that typically these electronic transitions are not happening only as electronic transitions, they are superimposed by the corresponding vibrational transitions also, because this electronic energy level has got different vibrational energy levels in that. Similarly, this electronic energy level, where the transition is going to lead finally to, that also has got different vibration energy levels there. So, from this level to this level, we can have large number of times. Say from this level here, this is my vibrational ground state of electronic ground state. From here, if a transition takes place, it can go from say 0 here to 1 here, 0 to 2, 0 to 3. So, we all these are very close by energy levels there. So, we will have energy which will be absorbed, say 200, 205, 210. So, all of them are getting absorbed simultaneously. Similarly, we can have transitions from say V is equal to 1 level to V is equal to 1 prime, 2 prime, 3 prime. So, there again what basically happens is that a very closely related kind of wavelengths of the radiation are getting absorbed. As a consequence, what happens is we get very close signals there. So, we get a spread, we get a band over there. Let us look at the spectrum here. Suppose I take a molecule in the gas phase, the spectrum looks something like this. So, what do we have is, we have say from about 245 nanometers here to about 270 nanometers, we find that there are series of signals coming over there. This basically is called as a band. This is a whole band coming over there, that is happening only in the gas phase there. Now, when we move on to the solution phase, in solution phase what happens is that this molecule with the spectrum of which we have just seen as some made up of a band made up of number of signals over there. In the solution phase what happens is these molecules are in constant motion firstly, which were there in the gaseous phase as well, but now we have got large number of solvent molecules in that, and these molecules of interest to us, which we want to make the spectrum of, that molecule is in constant collision with the solvent molecules. As a consequence, the energies of this molecule, that means that energy, electronic energy and the vibration energy we are talking about, they get spread out a little, because depending on whether the collision is happening or what is the intensity of collision, and many more factors are involved in that. As a consequence, what happens is the spectrum becomes smoothened, something which I showed you earlier. That means if I take the same molecule in the gaseous phase, I would have expected some series of lines over here, but now all that has got smoothened out and I get some kind of a continuous spectrum over there. So, that is a consequence of the molecule being in the solution. So, firstly there is a band spectrum because of the superimposition of the vibrational excitations simultaneous with the electronic excitation, that is one. And second effect is because of the collision with the solvent molecules, that actually spreads out the energies of the orbitals, the energy levels there, and as a consequence we get a spectrum of this kind there. Now, solution spectra, as I mentioned, gives a smooth and continuous spectrum there. Okay. Now, let us sum up what we have done today. What we have done today is that we briefly reviewed the contents of the previous session, where we talked about spectroscopy in general. Thereafter, we defined what is UV spectroscopy and outlined its significance, what are the kind of applications we can think of UV spectroscopy, qualitative as well as quantitative. Thereafter, what we did was we described our UV visible spectrum, that is how does it look like and what are its characteristics, that means the position, intensity and the width, and then thereafter we try to explain each of these characteristics in detail, and particularly we focus attention on to two aspects. One is the position and second of the width part of it, that means we have got the gas phase spectra and then the solution phase spectra and so on and so forth. Intensity also we touched upon in terms of the transition probability. Now, in the next session we will continue from here and we will try to see what are the factors that affect our UV spectrum and what kind of information can we get from that kind of spectra which we get as a consequence of this kind of perturbances of the spectrum there. Thank you.